Right, so someone sent me this message I think it was at the end of November. The person asks here, "Hi Aslam, please advise on how one can get a Pick and Pay container franchise and what are the requirements, including all the costs, and do the same with the Boxer one." And they've got a picture here of a Shoprite USave and a Pick and Pay container market, Glenridge market. So these are similar, but they're very different. I'm not going to speak about the Boxer one. I'm only going to speak about the difference between the Pick and Pay one and the Shoprite one. Okay, because Boxer basically falls under Pick and Pay, so I'm assuming it would just be the same as Pick and Pay anyway. So let's first speak about the easier one, which is the Shoprite USave. So with Shoprite USave, yeah, it's not a franchise. You are basically a landlord, and Shoprite is your tenant. So they've got a format that is called the Shoprite USave Ekasi format. And essentially how this works is if you've got a piece of land, it must measure at least 350 square meters. They need to have access to water and electricity. And the land also needs to be zoned for business. So that will be the biggest cost here, because if in most cases a piece of land that size more than likely is not zoned for business. So you're going to need to use a town planner, and the town planner will have to rezone that property. That can take several months. It can take even up to 18 months sometimes. And it could cost anywhere between 60, depending on who the town planner is. I'm estimating 60, 65, maybe even up to 85,000 Rand to rezone the property. Hopefully there is already services in the area, because if it's a 350, 400 square meter stand, there should be services in the area. So I can't imagine that you would have to spend for services. But I mean, if you were to spend for services, then that cost can increase dramatically. How much do they pay? They pay rental between 7 to 8,000 Rand a month rental. And they basically come in and they set up this entire thing at their own cost and they run it. So the store doesn't belong to you. They are just renting your land, and they are paying you rent for the land. And I actually like it, because the only thing you're really paying here is for the rates and taxes. Now, just note, if you rezone a property from residential to business, there is an increase in the cost of the rates and taxes. I don't know. I know people are going to ask, how much is it going to be? I have no idea. Okay, it all depends on the municipality. It depends on the size of the stand. But I can't imagine it would be that much more, because there is no building on the property. So, the municipality is not going to value that property based on a container that's on there. It's only when there's a fixed structure on it, then they will recalculate based on that value. So they're just going to look at the land, it's zoned for business, and they're going to increase the rate to business rates, which is more expensive. Let's go on to the Pick and Pay one. So with the Pick and Pay one, this one here is far more complex. Personally, I'm not a fan of this here. Yeah, you are not a landlord. Yeah, you are basically a store owner. And in fact, how this format works, they started it around 2016, I believe. And how this works is you already need to be an owner of a spaza shop, because all they're doing is they are converting a spaza shop into a formal store, which kind of defeats the purpose of, informal retail, because what they're basically doing here is they're turning your informal retail spaza shop into a formal store. And the costs are huge. There's nothing on the website or anything really online that says how much it's going to cost. The only thing I was able to find was this. So this was an article that was on one of the websites, where this particular store, the Basiani Market Store, was funded to the tune of 4.7 million by the Small Enterprise Finance Agency, SEFA, as part of Pick and Pay's Township Initiative. Okay, and that was 4.7 million. Now that's already a huge amount of money, right? And there are various grants. So how are they raising? How are these spaza shop owners getting this money raised? This is how they're raising it. This was on a completely different website, and you can see here, once the process, so this is the due diligence process, has been completed, the applicant and site are considered suitable. Financial check is conducted. The grants from the department, which is about 500,000, and Pick and Pay 550 to 650,000, cover between 30% to 40% of the total setup cost, which means between Pick and Pay and who's that? The grants from the department. Now, I noticed that in all the regions, there are various departments that are funding this initiative. So they give you between 30 to 40% of the money. Then the balance of the money is either coming via CFA or NEF, National Empowerment Fund, or the likes of Nedbank or ABSA. And the grant portion doesn't have to be repaid. But just think about this, right? You're raising, I think about on this particular one, about 1 million rand was a grant. Right, there was about 1 million rand of that 4.7 that was a grant. 3.7 million rand is basically debt that is now sitting, in this business, and that's where it becomes extremely expensive. And a lot of the people that have gone this way, they're actually complaining that it's not working for them because the profits have decreased significantly. Because also once you start buying, once the store is set up. Remember, they are spending money on things like what? They are upgrading the aesthetics of the store, what it looks like on the outside. They are upgrading your till points. They are upgrading your fridge, your refrigeration equipment. So they're spending a huge amount of money, and then they're giving you training, and that comes at a cost. So a lot of the store owners are now complaining because they also have to be limited to buying only from the Pick n Pay distribution center. Not all their products, but the majority of the products are then purchased from the Pick n Pay distribution center. Very similar to a franchise model, but I don't see anything mentioned about franchise fees or anything like that. And what this basically does is it now gives your spaza shop this enhanced, formalized feel. And it's, people can come in there and it's more organized, and the staff, are probably more, up to date with how to run manage or work in a store like this. The store owner has been trained. But like I say, it comes with the big business issues, which is if you don't know how to manage your cash flow, you're going to run this business into the ground. I already see a problem with this. I studied finance. I was in the bank, and the biggest problem I see with this model, they are loading too much of debt onto the structure, which they have to do because most spaza shop owners are not going to have the funds to put into something like this. But the most ideal funding structure would have been, if it's going to cost you 4.7 million and you're getting, say, a grant of R1 million, which you don't need to repay. Now you've got 3.7. Of that 3.7, ideal situation, you want to be putting at least 50 to 60% funding into that of your own money. Otherwise, you're going to have this huge debt burden where you're going to need to repay this debt every single month. And obviously, then your profits are going to be lower. But most people won't have that money to put in. So I understand, with the funding they're putting in. But to me, it just doesn't work. It's the same thing like when people go get 100% bonds, rent out a property, and then wonder why they're not making any money. You have too much of debt. Equity and debt need to go hand in hand. Too much of debt is going to kill any business or any investment. Cash flow is king. You raise debt in a business to the level of what the cash flow is going to be able to support. And I think they are being overly aggressive with how they're funding this. So if I were to choose between these two models, me personally, this is not financial advice, I would go the Shoprite route. You're making less money, but it's a lot less stress. I would just become the landlord. But if you want to become a retailer, then that is how it would work if you go the Pick n Pay route.